Well, this is great, Murray. Finally, a subject I personally guarantee to be painless and exciting.
I'm sorry, have we met? The Harlan I know usually finds required subjects like math, history, and the U.S. Constitution to be, and I quote, torture.
Well, that's ridiculous, Marie. I'm fascinated by the Constitution.
You are?
Aye, me hearties. Tales of the Seven Seas, capturing the British ship Java off Brazil back in 1812. Just me and me shipmates on old Ironsides.
Harlan, you're talking about the USS Constitution? Old Ironsides, that's a boat.
Well, technically, it's a ship, Murray.
Regardless, this program is about the U.S. Constitution, spelled with one S. Ring a bell? It's our country's set of basic rules and laws.
I knew that.
Great. Then I'm sure you'll agree it is an exciting subject.
Interesting, maybe. Exciting might be a bit of a stretch. How's this?
Fair enough, I guess.
Now, this may be a dumb question, but...
They say there are no dumb questions, Harlan. Of course, they never met you.
Very funny, Marie. Seriously, I don't see why we need a constitution at all. It's old, it's all yellowed with age. I can hardly read the thing. I mean, you talk about weird penmanship.
Okay, stop. Harlan, would you play football or baseball without a set of rules?
Well, every sport has a rule book, but what does that have to do with the Constitution?
Okay, well, think of it this way. Our Constitution sets up a kind of rule book for the whole country. It lays out the basic way our government is organized and operated and establishes what's known as a constitutional government.
Clever name.
Accurate name. You see, a constitutional government limits the powers of the government while protecting the individual rights of the people.
So everybody then, all the players have to play by the Constitution rulebook. Now that I can understand.
You've got it. The Constitution sets up a higher law of the land that everybody, or as you, Mr. Sports is My Life, would put it, all the players must obey.
Everybody, huh?
Yep. The president, congressmen and women, even the Supreme Court justices all have to play by the same rules.
How about us?
Certainly us. Harlan, do you realize we are the most important players in our system of government?
Us?
Yep.
You and me?
We.
Is that first-year French, or do you mean we as in we?
We as in we the people. Those three words are vitally important to understanding our entire system of government, Harlan. You see, unlike some countries, we, the citizens of the United States, granted our government and its leaders the privilege of governing us for our common good. But, and this is very important, we, the people, are the ultimate authority.
No kings, queens, or dictators for us.
That's right. You see, after we had declared our independence from England, our central government operated under the Articles of Confederation. But the Articles left the government far too weak to govern effectively. So, we began to revise the Articles, which led to the drafting of our Constitution. Here, Harlan, read this. Out loud, Harlan.
Sorry. We the people. I feel kind of silly, Murray.
Humor me.
We the people of the United States.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Establish justice.
Ensure domestic tranquility.
Provide for the common defense.
Promote the general welfare.
And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Well said, Harlan. That's called the preamble to the Constitution, a kind of introduction, and I think it beautifully explains just what the purpose of our Constitution is.
Well, I'll have to admit it sounds better than it looks. I mean, what is it with that handwriting? I bet it took forever just to write it. Wonder how many quills they went through.
Actually, it took less than 4 months. And just think, our Constitution has lasted well over 200 years. In fact, our Constitution is the oldest continual form of government in use today.
That's pretty impressive. I guess the writers, the authors, what did you call them?
The framers of the Constitution, Harlan.
Because they were so square?
Oh, boy. Because after studying many different past forms of government, they combined many ideas and ideals to create a framework for our new government.
got it.
Now then, 55 men attended the Constitutional Convention.
Held in exciting Las Vegas.
Held in beautiful Philadelphia, Harlan.
Philadelphia, huh? Well, if they weren't going to Vegas, you'd think they'd at least have held it in Washington, D.C., being the nation's capital and everything.
Yes, Harlan, but at the time the Constitution was drafted, Philadelphia was our capital. In fact, it was the capital from 1790 until 1800.
I knew that.
Right. Just as I'm sure you know that after much debate, the framers decided upon a federal system of government.
Now, how'd they come up with that name?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's called a federal system of government because it shares its power and responsibilities with the individual states.
Oh, I guess that's why states like, say, Florida don't print their own money or start a post office or decide to declare war on Finland.
Right. You won't see any Florida Fives or Sunshine State stamps, much less a Florida flotilla. But at the same time, the states do reserve many powers for themselves, like operating schools, setting local laws, collecting taxes.
Oh, well, I know.
No comment. Now, at the Constitutional Convention,
Vegas would have been cooler.
actually warmer, and of course the city didn't even exist in 1787.
Well, now that's a pretty good reason.
As I was saying, at the Constitutional Convention, the individual colonies that later became states were understandably very concerned about creating too strong a central government.
Yeah, they'd had it with that royal jazz.
So, to protect and preserve the states' rights, but at the same time establish an effective national government, our Constitution was designed with 3 co-equal branches, so the power of each would be limited or checked by the other branches, creating a balance of power.
I guess the branches act sort of like umpires for each other.
Right. The president is the head of the executive branch, and the Constitution empowered him to enforce the nation's laws. He's also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and our ceremonial head of state. You know, a really big wig.
Yeah, now he wore a really big wig. And check out those Supreme Court justices.
They're part of the judicial branch, Harlan. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land and is called upon to interpret laws as they apply to the Constitution.
And last, but certainly not least, are the congressmen and women who are members of the House of Representatives and the senators who make up the Senate.
That's right. The House and the Senate together comprise the lawmaking branch of the federal government, the legislative branch. I'm impressed you remembered, Harlan.
How could I forget? It was drilled into me as a small child. Anyway, tell me more about these checks and balances.
Well, as I was saying, the 3 branches are co-equals and can check each other's powers. This way, no one branch can become too powerful. For example, any legislation that is passed by Congress must also be signed by the president before it can become a law.
When we say Congress, we mean the legislative branch, right?
Right.
Well, how can they check the president?
Suppose the president decides to veto a law passed by Congress. Congress can override his veto with a 2/3 majority vote.
Check. Sorry, just like saying that.
As I was saying, the legislative branch must also approve or disapprove appointments made by the executive branch.
The president.
That's right. For example, the Senate must approve or disapprove the president's appointment of a Supreme Court justice. In that way, the legislative branch has a check over both the executive and the judicial branches.
And speaking of the Supreme Court, they're part of the judicial branch, right? What kind of checks do they have?
Well, when reviewing lower court decisions that have been appealed, the court may be called upon to interpret laws passed by Congress and signed by the president to be sure they are constitutional, that is, fit the language and spirit of our Constitution. In this way, they can check the legislative and executive branches.
Check. Sorry. Well, even I can see how this checks and balances system really seems to work, Marie. So I guess that just about wraps it up. Those Constitution guys wrote the perfect document, except for that handwriting. Man.
No, that doesn't wrap it up. The framers of the Constitution had the foresight to realize that they hadn't created a perfect document. As Benjamin Franklin said, "Our new Constitution is now established, and it has an appearance that promises permanency. But in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes."
You know, he looks just like the picture on the money.
The fact is, Harlan, additions and changes to the new Constitution were proposed even as the states were being asked to ratify it. So, when the first Congress met, they added the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These amendments are known as the Bill of Rights and were ratified by 11 of the 13 states on December 15th, 1791.
I am assuming ratify means approval. We're not talking rodents here, are we?
Yes, Harlan, approval, not rats, as well you know.
So, if the first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights, I guess the First Amendment is where I get my First Amendment rights.
Pretty logical, isn't it?
Yeah.
The First Amendment is quite famous because it's so important in protecting our rights as individuals, Harlan. It prohibits government-established religion, guarantees freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to assemble, and the right to petition the government.
Now, the Second Amendment ensures the right to keep and bear arms.
The third prevents the government from keeping soldiers in private homes without the owner's consent.
The fourth prevents unreasonable search and seizure. So if the government's got a beef with me, they better have a very good reason to come knocking at my door.
You could and would put it that way. Now, the Fifth Amendment is pretty famous, too.
Yeah, I've heard people take the Fifth in trials, but I wasn't sure exactly what it meant.
The Fifth Amendment offers guarantees against violations in what's called due process in criminal cases. No person can be forced to testify against himself, and you cannot be tried for the same crime twice.
Speaking of trials, the Sixth Amendment guarantees a fair and speedy trial, an impartial jury, and the right to an attorney in all criminal cases.
The Seventh guarantees a jury trial in major non-criminal cases, and the Eighth Amendment prohibits excessive fines or bail and prohibits cruel and unusual punishment.
Don't you think required courses could be covered under the Eighth Amendment?
And no comment. The Ninth Amendment says that although certain rights have been listed in the Constitution, that doesn't mean that we, the people, don't retain other rights that aren't mentioned. And last but not least, the 10th Amendment says that any power not granted to the federal government or specifically prohibited to the states is reserved for the states or the people.
We, the people. What if we want to make more amendments?
Well, Article 5 of the Constitution established amendment procedures, so the Constitution can be modified as necessary.
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Well, you certainly have the right to. This ought to be good.
All men named Harlan who have reached their 25th birthday shall be given a tax-free income for life equal to that of the president.
Yeah, Harlan, that makes a lot of sense.
To me. Oh, wait a second. There, that ought to improve my chances. So, how do I get this amendment, as you so constitutionally put it, ratified?
Well, you either have to convince 2/3 of both houses of Congress.
The House of Representatives and the Senate, right?
Right, to propose your amendment.
Sounds unlikely.
Sounds impossible, or...
Yeah, what's the other way? Any easier?
Afraid not. The legislatures of 2/3 of the states would have to apply to Congress for a constitutional convention for the purpose of passing your improbable amendment.
Then what?
Then your amendment would have to be ratified.
Oh, you love that word, don't you?
By the legislatures of 3/4 of the states, or by conventions held in 3/4 of the states. In other words...
Not a chance, huh?
Nada.
So, what kind of amendments have we created?
26 amendments have been ratified, and yes, I do like that word, including the prohibition of slavery and ensuring the right to vote regardless of race, establishing the right of women to vote, limiting the president to 2 terms in office, and lowering the voting age to 18.
I've got a question. What if we pass an amendment and then change our mind?
Ever heard of prohibition?
Sure, Al Capone, Elliot Ness, gangsters. Ooh, I love those movies.
Well, it wasn't just in the movies, Harlan. In fact, the 18th Amendment prohibited the sale of liquor in the United States, but later we changed our minds and passed the 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment. Kind of an unamendment.
You know, Marie, all this talk about the Constitution and Philadelphia, I'm starting to get that strange urge I always seem to get about now. Field trip! Well, here we are, Independence Hall, built in 1732, as I recall.
Built in 1732, as you just read in the brochure.
Hey, I'll bet that's one of those farmers of the Constitution.
Framers of the Constitution, Harlan.
Jefferson, right?
Washington, Harlan.
Yeah, I knew that.
But over there is the Graff House, where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, I wonder how many quills he went through.
Oh, come on, let's go see the Liberty Bell.
Bummer of a crack.
Oh, I think it adds character, like those lines on your face.
Very funny. Marie, I'm getting hungry. And, you know, Philadelphia's famous for cheesesteak sandwiches. I'm a little short on cash. I don't suppose there's an ATM in here, is it?
No, but you could visit the First Bank of the United States.
Awesome.
Well, I'm visiting Independence Hall.
Whatever. Catch you at the plant. Don't be late again.
I'm almost never late. Well, hardly ever. Oh, wow. This is so beautiful. I'm glad Harlan isn't here. I'd have to hear more quill and penmanship jokes. Wow, that's George Washington's chair. Being here makes history come alive for me. Ooh, I gotta watch my time. Harlan, I hope those coolers aren't filled with Philly cheesesteaks.
Oh, of course not. I packed my clothes in some of them. Hey, Marie, what are all these charges for excess baggage?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing? A 2,080-pound excess weight baggage fee is nothing? Marie, you didn't steal the Liberty Bell, did you?
Of course not. It's just an authentic reproduction for my home.
Ooh, speaking of...
Home! Wow, that was fun. Philadelphia's great. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm ready for one of our soon-to-be famous, painless reviews.
Well, this ought to be good.
What?
I said I wish you would.
Ready? I promise this won't hurt a bit.
My seatbelt is latched, and I've returned my tray table to the full upright position. Shoot!
The Constitution is the framework of our federal system of government. It established 3 branches of government, limiting the powers of each and providing a system of checks and balances. The legislative branch has the power to make laws. The executive branch has the power to carry out and enforce laws, and the judicial branch has the power to handle conflicts over the enforcement, application, and interpretation of laws. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land and can be amended from time to time. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights, and 16 other amendments have been made over the years.
Wow, painless and fast.
Thank you. And I think pretty interesting as well.
Particularly our field trip. I love Philadelphia, and those Philly cheesesteak sandwiches were good for my constitution.
Oh, Harlan, my Liberty Bell looks great in our belfry.
Yeah, I always knew you were bats, Marie. Never knew you had a belfry, though.
You know, when you went to the First Bank in Philadelphia, I saw Betsy Ross.
You know, Tom Jefferson and I shared a Philly steak sandwich over at the City Tavern.
Hey, Harlan, we almost forgot the video quiz.
Oh, well, we wouldn't want to do that, would we? All right, everybody ready? Get out your quiz sheets and your number 2 pencils, please. Marie, ladies first.
Of course. For each of the following questions, answer true or false. Question number 1. The Constitution is the set of rules or guidelines that organizes our government.
2. A constitutional government limits the powers of the government.
3. In a federal system of government, the federal government shares power and responsibility with the states.
4. The Constitution is a permanent document which may never be changed.
5. There are only 10 amendments to the Constitution.
6. The introduction to the Constitution is called the preamble.
7. The name given to the individuals that created the Constitution is the Founding Fathers or the Framers.
8. All of the branches of government have equal power.
9. The Constitution does not specifically state the powers of the branches of government.
And last but not least, number 10, the Constitution can only be changed by the President of the United States.